My brother got a custom engraved watch. My sister-in-law got a spa weekend package. My nephew got a brand new bicycle with a red bow on the handlebar. I sat at the end of the dining table with my hands wrapped around a coffee mug that had gone cold, waiting for my name to be called. It never was. My father set down the last gift bag, brushed his hands together like he was finished with a task, and said, "All right, who wants pie?" Nobody looked at me. My mother was already unwrapping tissue paper. My sister-in-law was holding up a gift card to some spa in Scottsdale, saying it was too generous. My brother was strapping the watch onto his wrist, angling it toward the window to catch the light. I picked up my coffee mug and walked to the kitchen. I stood at the sink and looked out at the backyard where we used to play as kids. The oak tree was still there. The tire swing my father hung for my brother was still there too. Mine had come down years ago. I had forgotten about that until just now. That was my family's birthday party for my father. I had driven 4 hours to be there. I had brought a handmade photo book that took me 3 weekends to put together. I had paid for the catering because my mother said she was too tired to cook, and my brother said he was too busy to help organize. I had also quietly paid the venue deposit because my father wanted to rent out the back room of a restaurant and nobody else had stepped up to cover it. I did not say any of that out loud. I never did. I want to explain something before I go further, because if you have a family like mine, you already understand it, and if you do not, you might wonder why I stayed as long as I did. I am the middle child. My brother is 4 years older than me. My sister, I should clarify, she married into the family, but she behaved more like a blood relative than most, came along when my brother was 26. They have one son together, my nephew. My parents are retired. They live in a house in a suburb outside of Phoenix that I helped them buy, not gifted. I structured it as a loan because my financial advisor told me to, because even then, some part of me knew. My name is not important. What matters is what I do for a living, because that is the thread that runs through everything. I own a small but profitable event planning company. I started it at 22 with $8,000 I had saved working double shifts at a hotel. By the time I was 27, I had 3 full-time employees and a client roster that included 2 local government contracts. My family knew I had a business. What they did not fully understand, or perhaps what they chose not to think about, was how much of that business had been quietly propping theirs up. Let me explain. About 4 years ago, my brother decided to open a restaurant. He had no hospitality experience, no business plan that made sense, and no capital beyond what he had saved and what my parents contributed. My father came to me privately and asked if I could help. He said it as though he were asking a small favor. Could I pick up milk on the way over? Could I water the plants while they were gone? He said, "Your brother has a real shot at this. He just needs a little support." I said yes. I said yes because I loved my brother. I said yes because my father looked at me with something close to pride for the first time in a long time, and I was 30 years old and still chasing that. What that yes turned into was a co-signing arrangement on a commercial lease, a low-interest personal loan of $40,000, and because I knew people in the event and catering space, a referral network that brought my brother's restaurant its first 6 months of private event bookings. I also handled the vendor negotiations because my brother did not know how to read a contract. I did not tell my brother any of the behind-the-scenes work I had done to bring those early clients to him. I let him believe they had found him organically. I wanted him to feel proud of himself. His restaurant did well, not because of his vision, which was muddled at best, but because of the location I had suggested and the operational systems I helped him put in place quietly. By the second year, he was profitable enough to pay back a portion of what he owed me, not all of it, but some. I told him not to worry about the rest. That was a mistake, not because of the money, because of what it taught him about me. When you forgive a debt, some people feel grateful, some people feel guilty, and some people feel powerful, like they have discovered that you have no bottom, that no matter how far they reach, your pockets go deeper. Your patience stretches further. Your need for their approval will always outweigh their need to treat you well. My brother fell into the third category. So did my sister-in-law. So, eventually, did my parents. The birthday party was not the first time I had been overlooked. It was just the time I started keeping a list. 3 months before the birthday party, my sister-in-law had asked me to coordinate her best friend's bridal shower. Not hire my company, just personally coordinate it in my free time, using my vendor contacts as a favor. I had done it. 2 weeks later, she posted a reel on her social media, thanking everyone who helped make it special. She tagged 12 people. I was not one of them. 1 month before the birthday party, my brother called me to ask if I could cover the next quarter's rent on the restaurant because a big corporate client had backed out of a booking. He said he would pay me back by December. I said yes. He said, "I knew you'd come through. You always do." He said it warmly, like it was a compliment. 1 week before the birthday party, my mother called and told me to bring a dessert because the bakery she wanted was too expensive. She did not ask. She told me. Then she said, "Get something your father actually likes, not that fancy stuff you always bring." I brought his favorite, a plain white cake from a bakery near his childhood home, 3 hours out of my way. And then at the party, surrounded by people I had spent years quietly holding up, I sat at the end of the table with cold coffee and heard every name called except mine. After the pie was served and the gifts were stacked in a corner, my father pulled my brother aside to look at something in the garage. My nephew ran into the backyard. My mother and sister-in-law sat on the couch talking about a television show. I cleared the dessert plates. Nobody asked me to. Nobody thanked me either. On the drive home that night, I called my best friend. She has known me since we were 14. She listened to everything without interrupting, and when I finished, she said, "How long are you going to let this be the story?" I did not have an answer. I just drove. But something had shifted. Not dramatically. Not in a way I could explain in the moment. It was more like a small, quiet click, the way a lock sounds when it finally catches. I am going to pause here and ask you something. Have you ever realized that the people who take the most from you are often the ones who make you feel like you are the problem? That every time you try to name what is happening, they manage to turn it around so that you are the one who is ungrateful, oversensitive, making things bigger than they are? Because that is what my family did every single time I tried to say something. Once, about 2 years earlier, I had mentioned to my mother that I felt like my contributions went unnoticed. She had sighed and said, "You've always needed so much validation. I don't know where that comes from." Then she changed the subject. Once, I told my brother that the loan situation was starting to feel one-sided. He laughed and said, "You're doing fine. Don't make it weird." Once, I told my father that I wished he would ask how my business was doing, the way he always asked my brother about the restaurant. He looked genuinely confused and said, "I just assume no news is good news with you. You've always handled everything yourself." He meant it as a compliment. I know he did. That was the part that hurt the most. After the birthday party, I started doing something I had never done before. I started writing things down, not in a dramatic way, just a running note on my phone. Dates, amounts, favors, requests. I am not a confrontational person by nature. I needed to see it in front of me before I would believe it myself. By February, 3 months after the party, the note was 14 entries long. The one that broke me open was not the biggest. It was not the money. It was a Tuesday afternoon phone call from my sister-in-law. She needed help sourcing a specialty linen vendor for a dinner party she was throwing. It was a personal dinner party, not a business event. She called me at 2 in the afternoon while I was in a client meeting. I stepped out to take it because I recognized her number and thought something might be wrong. She wanted to know if I could just handle the whole vendor order for her. She said, "I know you have contacts. It'll take you 5 minutes. I said I was in a meeting. She said, "It's literally just an email." I said I would try to get to it later. She said, "I just feel like you always say you want to be helpful, and then when we actually need something, you're not really available." I stood in a hallway outside a conference room and held my phone and did not say a single word for 10 seconds. Then I said, "I'll see what I can do," and went back into my meeting. That night, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I thought about the commercial lease I had co-signed. I thought about it very carefully. Here is what my brother did not know. Here is what none of them knew. When I co-signed that lease 4 years ago, the property was owned by a private investment group. I had done the introduction, a client of mine knew the principal, and I had brokered the initial relationship as a favor to get my brother a good rate. 18 months later, that investment group decided to divest several of their smaller commercial properties. They offered right of first refusal to connected parties. I bought the building. I did not tell my family. I did not tell anyone. The purchase went through a separate LLC that held several of my business assets. The restaurant my brother ran, the one I had helped him build from a half-formed idea into a functioning business, was operating in a building that I now owned. His lease was with my company. He had been paying rent to me for over 2 years without knowing it. I had never planned to do anything with that information. I had bought the building as an investment, and I had kept the management deliberately arm's length because I did not want the complication. My property management handled everything. My brother's lease was legitimate, at market rate, no favors built in because I had not wanted it to look like I was subsidizing him further. But I had the lease. And the lease was month to month because his original term had expired in the fall, and my property management had sent a renewal notice that my brother had not gotten around to signing yet. I opened my laptop and looked at the lease agreement for a long time. I want to be clear about what I did next, because I think the way it is told matters. I did not act out of anger. I acted out of clarity. Those are two different things, and I have thought about the distinction many times since. Anger is reactive. It wants to burn something down. Clarity is quiet. It just wants to stop bleeding. I called my attorney the next morning. Not a family friend, my own attorney, someone I had worked with for years on business contracts. I explained the situation. She asked me what outcome I was looking for. I told her I did not want to destroy my brother. I just wanted out. Out of the financial entanglement, out of the invisible obligation, out of the role I had been cast in without anyone ever asking if I wanted the part. She drafted a notice of lease non-renewal, not an eviction, a standard notice that the current month-to-month arrangement would terminate at the end of a 60-day period, giving my brother more than enough time to find a new space or negotiate a new lease at current market terms. She also drafted a formal accounting of the outstanding personal loan balance, converted into a promissory note with a structured repayment plan. I signed both documents on a Thursday afternoon in March. I scheduled delivery for a Saturday morning, which happened to be the day my brother and sister-in-law were hosting their annual spring brunch. They hosted it every year. They considered it their signature social event. They had asked me 3 weeks earlier if I could help with the floral arrangements since I knew people. I had said yes. I had ordered the flowers. They would be delivered at 10 in the morning. The documents arrived at 9:45. I know that timing sounds calculated, and it was. Not cruelly. I had not intended to humiliate anyone in front of guests. The brunch did not start until 11. I had accounted for that. What I wanted was for there to be no way to set it aside, no way to tuck it in a drawer and call me later to smooth it over. I wanted it to land when my brother and sister-in-law were together, when they would have to look at it at the same time, when they could not spin it into a private conversation they could control. My sister-in-law opened the door for the delivery. From what I was told later, I was not there. She assumed it was the flowers. She took the envelope inside and set it on the kitchen counter. My brother opened it while she was putting coffee on. She heard him say her name in a tone she had never heard before. She came back into the kitchen and read it over his shoulder. She called me at 9:51. I did not answer. She called again at 9:53. I did not answer. My brother called at 9:58. I did not answer. My mother called at 9:58. I did not answer. My mother called at 10:17. I did not answer. My father called at 10:44. He left a voicemail. He said, "I don't know what's gotten into you. Your brother is in a panic. This isn't like you. Please call me back. We need to talk about this as a family." The flowers arrived at 10 o'clock as scheduled. White, ranunculus, and eucalyptus, exactly what my sister-in-law had asked for. The delivery driver said later, he told this to my brother when my brother demanded to know who had sent them, that there was a card attached. The card said, "Enjoy the brunch." The arrangements are covered. I was not home when all of this was happening. I was at a farmer's market 2 towns over, buying coffee and looking at handmade pottery. It was 62 degrees and the sun was out, and I ate half a breakfast sandwich standing next to a truck that sold them, and I watched people walk their dogs, and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. I felt like myself. Let me explain what 60 days looks like from the outside. The first 2 weeks were loud. My phone was full. My mother left 7 voicemails, my father left 4, my brother sent 31 text messages that I read but did not respond to. My sister-in-law sent one long email that cycled through several emotional registers: confusion, then hurt, then indignation, then a strange kind of bargaining where she suggested I'd clearly been under too much stress and perhaps we should all sit down and reset. I did not respond to any of it. Not because I was punishing them. Because I had nothing left to explain. I had been explaining for years and nothing had changed. A response now would only open a negotiation, and I was not interested in negotiating the terms of my own dignity. My attorney handled all communication related to the lease and the loan. At the end of week 2, my brother showed up at my apartment. He did not call first. He knocked on my door at 7 in the evening on a Wednesday. And when I looked through the peephole and saw him standing there, I took a breath and opened the door. He looked tired. He looked older than I had seen him look in a while. He said, "Can we talk?" I said, "Talk." He said he was blindsided. He said he had no idea I owned the building. He said he felt like I had been keeping secrets from him. I let him finish. Then I asked him one question. I said, "When is the last time you asked me how I was doing?" Not to ask for something, just to ask. He opened his mouth and closed it again. I said, "I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because I realized I had built a version of this family entirely with my own hands, and nobody noticed and nobody asked. I need that to stop." He said, "So what, you're just done with us?" I said, "I'm done being the one who holds everything up while everyone acts like it's standing on its own." There was a long silence. He looked at the floor. He said, "I didn't know you felt this way." I said, "You didn't ask." He left. I closed the door and stood in my hallway for a moment. My hands were completely steady. That surprised me. The promissory note was signed 3 weeks later. My attorney handled the exchange. My brother found a new location for the restaurant within the 60-day window, a space downtown that actually suited the business better than the original. The transition was not easy for him, but it was manageable and it was his to manage. My parents tried for several more weeks. My father's calls became less frequent and more careful, like he was choosing his words differently now. My mother went through a period of telling mutual family friends that I was going through something. I heard about this secondhand and felt nothing in particular about it. There was one conversation in late April that I will share because I think it mattered. My father asked to meet me for coffee. Not at the house. Neutral Ground, a diner we used to go to when I was small. I said yes because I wanted to say yes. I still loved my father. I want to be honest about that. This was never about not loving them. It was about what love looks like when it is only flowing in one direction. We sat across from each other in a booth by the window. He ordered black coffee. I ordered the same. We talked around things for a few minutes and then he looked at me and said, "When did you become so hard?" I looked at him for a moment. Then I said, "I didn't become hard, Dad. I became honest." Those probably look the same from where you're sitting. He stirred his coffee for a long time. Then he said, "I know we didn't always make you feel seen." It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I had ever gotten from him. I will not pretend it did not affect me. It did. I looked out the window and took a breath and I said, "I know you love me. I'm not questioning that. But love isn't only a feeling, it's also what you do. And for a long time, what you all did was take." He did not have an answer for that. Neither of us spoke for a while. We finished our coffee. He paid for it. Outside in the parking lot, he hugged me, stiffly, the way he always did, and I let him, and I hugged him back. It was not a resolution. It was not a scene from a movie. It was just two people sitting with something real, for the first time in years. I want to tell you what I know now that I wish I had understood earlier. Because if you are watching this and you recognize any part of what I've described, I want to say this directly to you. The version of you that gives endlessly and asks for nothing in return is not your best self. It is not generosity. It is fear wearing the costume of generosity. The fear that if you stop giving, they will stop showing up. The fear that your worth in this family is tied to your usefulness. The fear that if you draw a line, you will be alone. Here's what I found on the other side of that fear. I found that some people do not come back when you stop being convenient, and that is devastating. And it is also information. I found that the silence after I stopped answering was not emptiness. It was the sound of my own life, which had been drowned out for so long I had forgotten what it sounded like. I found that I could sit in a booth in a diner with my father and have one real conversation, and that it was not everything, but it was something, and maybe something was always what was available, and I had been so focused on the gap between something and everything that I had missed it entirely. My brother's restaurant is still open. He sends me a text on my birthday now. Last year, it just said, "Happy birthday, hope you're good." I responded, that felt right. My sister-in-law and I do not have a relationship. That may change, it probably will not. I have made peace with both possibilities. My father and I have coffee about once a month. He asks about my business now. Not every time, but sometimes. I tell him the parts that are going well. He listens. It is not the relationship I wanted when I was 22. But I am not 22 anymore, and the one we are building now is at least built on something true. My mother and I are still working on it. She sent me a birthday card in January with a handwritten note that said she was proud of me. She had never written that in a card before. I kept it. The company is doing well. I took on 2 new employees this spring. I have a client list I am proud of. I sleep without the background hum of other people's problems running through my mind. I drive past the building sometimes. The restaurant has a new sign. The awning my brother finally replaced is a deep green, and it suits the block better than the old one did. It looks like something he built himself. In a way, I suppose, it is. And so is this. There is a version of this story where I stayed, where I kept writing the checks, kept sourcing the vendors, kept showing up with the right dessert and the right flowers and the right answer every time someone called. I know that version well because I lived it for years. And I want to be honest with you about something. That version felt like love for a long time. It felt like being needed, and I confused being needed with being valued. Those are not the same thing, and the distance between them is where a lot of damage quietly accumulates. What I have come to understand is that the way we treat people teaches them how to treat us in return. Not because people are calculating or cruel by nature, but because human beings adapt to what is consistently available. When I made myself endlessly available, financially, logistically, emotionally, without ever naming what I needed back, I was not being generous. I was writing the rules of a dynamic and then resenting everyone for following them. That is not their fault entirely. It is not mine entirely either. But it is something I had to own before anything could change. The hardest part of what I did was not the legal paperwork. It was not the 60 days of silence or the unanswered calls. The hardest part was accepting that setting a boundary would feel, to the people who had benefited from its absence, like an act of aggression. My father called it hardness. My sister-in-law called it unavailability. My brother called it a betrayal. None of them used the word that I think was closest to the truth, which was consequence. What they were experiencing was simply the natural consequence of a decade of choices, theirs and mine both, finally catching up at the same time. That is how life works, whether we pay attention to it or not. The things we do or fail to do accumulate. They do not disappear just because no one is keeping a visible score. I was keeping score on a notes app on my phone, but the real accounting was happening in my body, in my sleep, in the background hum of exhaustion that I had normalized so thoroughly I thought it was just what being an adult felt like. Integrity is not a dramatic thing. It does not arrive with a trumpet. It is built quietly, one honest decision at a time, often in moments where the easier choice would have been to say yes again and get off the phone. What I found when I started making different choices was that I respected myself more and that the people who truly wanted a relationship with me, not access to me, but a real relationship, were capable of adjusting. Not perfectly, not immediately, but they tried. That matters. If any part of this story felt familiar, I want to leave you with this. The strength to stop is not the same as the strength to destroy. Walking away from a dynamic that diminishes you is not cruelty. It is the most intelligent thing you can do, because a relationship built on one person's endless giving and another's endless taking is not a relationship. It is a transaction. And you are worth more than that. So am I. It just took me longer than it should have to believe it.